I was elbow-deep in potting soil when Karen Morrison first showed up at my greenhouse door, clipboard in hand, and a smile so fake it could have been made in a factory in China. "Good morning, Mr. Quincy," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'm here for a routine inspection of your property." I wiped my hands on my jeans and straightened up, looking at this woman who had somehow become the president of our HOA in Willow Creek, Oregon. She was maybe 50 years old, with highlighted blonde hair cut into that aggressive bob that seemed to be the universal uniform of women who wanted to speak to managers everywhere. "An inspection," I said. "Karen, I've lived here for 8 years. Nobody's ever done an inspection before." "Well, things are different now," she said, her smile tightening at the corners. "We're enforcing the rules more strictly. May I come in?" I should have said no. I should have asked to see some kind of authorization or called my lawyer right then. But I was naive, and I figured I had nothing to hide. My greenhouse was my pride and joy, a beautiful 800-square-foot structure where I grew organic vegetables, herbs, and flowers. I supplied half the vendors at the Willow Creek Farmers Market every Saturday, and my produce was some of the best in the county. "Sure," I said, stepping aside. Karen walked in like she owned the place, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. She started making notes on her clipboard immediately, her pen scratching aggressively against the paper. "This structure," she said, not looking up, "was this approved by the HOA before construction?" "It was built by the previous owner in 2009, I said. "Long before the current HOA was established, and definitely before you became president. She made another note. "And these commercial growing operations. The HOA covenant states that no business activities can be conducted on residential property." I felt my stomach drop. "I'm not running a business. I grow vegetables and sell the extras at the farmer's market. It's a hobby." "A hobby that generates income is a business, Mr. Quincy." She walked over to my tomato plants, which were thriving in their hydroponic system. "And these systems, are they creating excess moisture? I'm concerned about mold and pest issues that could affect neighboring properties. My greenhouse is completely sealed and climate controlled. It doesn't affect anyone else." She ignored me, continuing her inspection. For the next 20 minutes, she found fault with everything. The greenhouse was too close to the property line, even though it had been grandfathered in. My composting bins were a potential nuisance, despite being completely odor-free and necessary for my organic growing methods. The small shed where I stored my tools wasn't the right color, even though it matched my house perfectly. By the time she left, I had a sinking feeling in my gut that this wasn't going to end well. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA. It was 5 pages long, single-spaced, detailing 17 alleged violations related to my greenhouse and gardening operation. At the bottom was a notice that I had 30 days to remedy all violations or face fines of $500 per day per violation. The letter also stated that if the violations weren't corrected within 60 days, the HOA had the right to enter my property and remove the offending structures at my expense. I sat at my kitchen table, reading the letter 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. They wanted me to tear down my greenhouse. They wanted me to stop selling at the farmer's market. They wanted me to paint my shed a color from an approved palette that hadn't even existed when it was built. They wanted me to move my compost bins, which would require completely restructuring my entire garden layout. I called my neighbor, Marcus, who had lived in the neighborhood even longer than I had. "She's lost her mind," Marcus said when I told him. "Graham, you know half the neighborhood loves what you do. My wife buys her tomatoes from you every week at the market." What do I do? Get a lawyer. This is insane. I took his advice and made an appointment with Patricia Chen, a real estate attorney in downtown Willow Creek. Her office was in one of those renovated historic buildings, all exposed brick and modern furniture. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, but she came highly recommended. Patricia read through the HOA letter with a furrowed brow. "This is aggressive," she said. "Unnecessarily so." "Graham, can I ask you something? Have you had any conflicts with Karen Morrison before this?" I thought about it. "Not really. I mean, I voted against her when she ran for HOA president last year, and I signed a petition to stop her from implementing those ridiculous landscaping requirements. But nothing personal." "She's targeting you," Patricia said flatly. "This isn't about violations. This is about control and probably revenge. The good news is that most of these alleged violations are questionable at best. The greenhouse was there before the current HOA rules. Your farming activity qualifies as residential agriculture, which is protected under Oregon state law. But the bad news is that fighting this will take time and money." "How much money?" "To start, $5,000 as a retainer. Could go higher if this gets nasty." I left her office feeling sick. I wasn't wealthy. I worked as a software engineer for a mid-sized tech company, and my side income from the farmers market helped pay for my daughter's college tuition. Emily was a sophomore at Oregon State, studying environmental science, and she was counting on me. That Saturday at the farmers market, I set up my booth as usual. I had crates of heirloom tomatoes, bundles of fresh basil and cilantro, zucchini the size of baseball bats, and bouquets of sunflowers. The market was held in the parking lot of the community center, and it was always packed with locals looking for fresh, organic produce. "Graham," called out Sarah, who ran the artisan bread booth next to mine. "I heard about the HOA thing. That's terrible." News traveled fast in a small town. Within an hour, half the vendors knew what was happening. They were sympathetic, but there was something else in their eyes, too. Worry. Jennifer, who sold organic honey, pulled me aside. "Graham, where do you think I'm going to get my produce if they shut you down? You supply me, you supply the juice bar on Main Street, you supply the restaurant at the Vineyard. You're the backbone of the local organic scene here." "I'm fighting it," I assured her. But that evening, as I packed up my unsold inventory, Karen Morrison appeared. She was dressed like she was going to a country club, not a farmer's market, in pressed white pants and a pink blazer. "Mr. Quincy," she said, "I'm surprised to see you here conducting your unlawful business activities." "It's not unlawful, Karen. This is perfectly legal. According to the HOA covenant you signed when you purchased your property. It's not. I'd hate to see you continue accumulating fines." She looked around at the other vendors who were watching us. "It would be such a shame if your stubbornness affected other people." It was a threat, and everyone heard it. On Monday, Patricia filed a response to the HOA's letter, arguing that the violations were invalid and requesting a formal hearing before the HOA board. Under Oregon law, I had the right to present my case before any enforcement action could be taken. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later in the community center's conference room. I spent those weeks documenting everything. I gathered receipts proving when the greenhouse was built, photos showing that it met all county building codes, surveys proving it was within the property lines, and statements from neighbors saying my activities didn't negatively impact them. I also did some research into Karen Morrison. It turned out she had tried to start her own organic products business a few years ago and failed spectacularly. Her company, Pure Life Organics, had gone bankrupt within 18 months. I wondered if seeing my success at the farmers market grated on her. The night before the hearing, Emily called me from college. "Dad, are you okay? I heard about what's happening." "I'm fine, honey. Don't worry about it." "This is so stupid. Your greenhouse is amazing. I grew up eating vegetables from that greenhouse." "I know. I'm going to fight this." "Do you need money? I can take out a loan or get a job or something." "Absolutely not. You focus on school. I've got this handled." I wasn't sure I believed myself, but I had to sound confident for her. The hearing room was packed. Karen sat at the head of the table with 4 other board members. Doug Anderson, a retired accountant; Lisa Pearson, a real estate agent; Tom Bradley, who owned a landscaping company; and Michelle Rogers, a stay-at-home mom. Patricia sat beside me, her briefcase open and organized stacks of documents in front of her. At least 20 neighbors showed up, filling the chairs along the walls. Marcus was there, along with several other people from my street. I also saw some familiar faces from the farmers' market. Karen called the hearing to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. She looked pleased with herself, like she was playing president in some twisted fantasy. "We're here to address the multiple covenant violations at 847 Maple Drive, the property of Graham Quincy," she began. "Mr. Quincy has been operating a commercial greenhouse operation in violation of our residential use only covenant. He has also failed to maintain his property according to HOA standards. We have photographic evidence and inspector reports documenting these violations." Patricia stood up. "May I speak?" Karen looked annoyed. "In a moment. I need to present the HOA's case first." For the next 45 minutes, Karen went through her list of complaints in excruciating detail. She had photos that made my beautiful greenhouse look like some kind of industrial facility. She had blown up images of my compost bins, taken from unflattering angles. She even had testimonies from 2 neighbors I'd never spoken to, claiming my activities were disruptive and lowered property values. When she finally finished, Patricia stood up calmly. "Thank you, Miss Morrison. Now, let's address these claims with facts rather than hysteria." Karen's face went red. "I'm not being hysterical. You're claiming that a greenhouse built 15 years ago, before the current HOA rules existed, is suddenly a violation. That's like changing the rules of a game in the middle and then penalizing players for not having followed them. Oregon law is very clear on grandfather clauses for structures that predate HOA regulations." Patricia pulled out a thick folder. "Here is the building permit from 2009, approved by Douglas County. Here is the certificate of occupancy. Here is the survey showing the greenhouse is well within property boundaries. And here," she pulled out another document, "is the Oregon Residential Agriculture Statute, which explicitly protects homeowners' rights to grow and sell produce from their property." Doug Anderson, the retired accountant, leaned forward. "Can I see that statute?" Patricia handed it over. Doug read it carefully, then looked at Karen. "This seems pretty clear. If he's growing food for personal use and selling the surplus, it's protected under state law. The HOA covenant can't override state law." "It's not just surplus," Karen snapped. "He's running a commercial operation. He has customers, he has regular sales, he has a business." "I have a hobby that makes a little extra money," I said. "Last year I made about $12,000 total from farmers' market sales. After expenses, that's maybe $6,000 in profit. That's not a commercial operation. That's someone who loves gardening and shares the results with his community." Lisa Pearson, the real estate agent, spoke up. "Karen, I have to say, I've never heard complaints about Graham's property before. In fact, several buyers have specifically mentioned the neighborhood's commitment to sustainability and local food as a selling point. This seems like it could actually be increasing property values, not decreasing them." I could see Karen's control slipping. Her face was getting redder, and her knuckles were white from gripping her papers so hard. "What about the shed color?" she demanded. "The covenant clearly states that all outbuildings must be painted in approved colors." Patricia didn't miss a beat. The shed was painted in 2010, before the approved color list existed. Again, grandfather clause. And even if it wasn't, the current shade is within 3 points of approved color number 14 on the current palette. I had it professionally analyzed. Tom Bradley, the landscaping company owner, raised his hand. "I actually think Graham's property looks great. I drive by it all the time. It's well maintained, the greenhouse is attractive, and frankly, I wish more homeowners took that much pride in their gardens." Karen stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. The board needs to vote on enforcement action." "Actually," Patricia said, "before any vote, I'd like to submit statements from neighbors supporting Mr. Quincy." She pulled out a folder with over 30 signed statements from people in the neighborhood. Marcus had helped me collect them, going door to door. The statements praised my greenhouse, talked about how they loved buying my produce, and said my property was an asset to the community. Michelle Rogers read through several of them. "Karen, these are really positive." "I don't understand why we're even pursuing this." "Because rules are rules," Karen shouted. The room went silent. She seemed to realize she'd lost her composure and sat back down, smoothing her hair. "We have a responsibility to enforce our covenants equally and fairly." "But you're not enforcing them equally," said a voice from the back. It was Marcus. "Tom Bradley has a landscaping trailer parked at his house half the time. That's commercial equipment on residential property. Lisa Pearson has her real estate signs in her yard. Doug Anderson runs a tax preparation business from his home office. But Graham is the only one being targeted." Tom shifted uncomfortably. "The trailer is only there when I'm between jobs. Still commercial use of residential property, according to Karen's interpretation," Marcus said. The hearing was falling apart for Karen. Patricia seized the moment. "I move that the board dismiss all alleged violations against Mr. Quincy and issue a written statement that his greenhouse and farming activities are in full compliance with both HOA covenants and Oregon state law." Doug spoke up. "I second that motion." Karen looked like she might explode. "You can't just make a motion like that. I'm the president." "And we're the board," Doug said. "Patricia is right. This is a waste of everyone's time and the HOA's resources. All in favor?" Doug, Lisa, Tom, and Michelle all raised their hands. "Motion passes," Doug said. "Graham, I apologize for this whole mess. Your greenhouse is fine. Keep doing what you're doing." I felt relief wash over me, but I could see the fury in Karen's eyes. This wasn't over. Sure enough, 2 weeks later I received another letter. This time it was from Karen personally, not on HOA letterhead. She was invoking an obscure clause in the covenant about nuisance activities and claiming that my greenhouse created excessive traffic in the neighborhood during harvest season. Patricia advised me to ignore it. "She's acting outside her authority now. The board already ruled in your favor. If she keeps harassing you, we can pursue legal action against her personally." But Karen wasn't done. She started showing up at the farmer's market, taking photos of my booth, counting my customers, making notes on her clipboard. She'd stand nearby, close enough that my customers could see her, and just watch with this smug expression. Sales started to drop. People were uncomfortable. Sarah from the bread booth told me that Karen had approached several vendors, warning them that they could be held liable if they purchased produce from an illegal operation. "She's intentionally trying to sabotage you," Patricia said when I called her. "We need to consider a restraining order." But before we could file anything, the situation took a dramatic turn. It was a Wednesday afternoon and I was in my greenhouse, checking on my pepper plants. The summer season was winding down, but I still had strong production going. My bell peppers were gorgeous, my jalapenos were perfect, and I had specialty varieties that restaurants in Portland had started ordering. There was a knock on my door. When I opened it, I found Karen standing there with 3 men I'd never seen before. They were wearing work clothes and carrying equipment. "Mr. Quincy," Karen said with false politeness, "the HOA board has authorized the removal of your greenhouse due to continuing violations. These gentlemen are here to begin demolition." My heart stopped. "What? The board ruled in my favor." "You can't do this." That ruling was regarding the previous violations. These are new violations related to water runoff and potential foundation issues. We've given you adequate notice. I never received any notice. That's not my problem. Please step aside. One of the men looked uncomfortable. "Madam," he says, "he didn't get notice. We can't just start tearing down someone's property without proper notification." "You're being paid to do a job," Karen snapped. "Do it." I pulled out my phone and called Patricia. She answered on the second ring. "Graham, Karen is at my house with a demolition crew. She says they're tearing down my greenhouse." "What? Don't let anyone touch anything. I'm calling the police and I'll be there in 10 minutes. I hung up and blocked the entrance to my greenhouse. "Nobody is touching this structure until my lawyer gets here and we verify this is legal." "You're trespassing," Karen said. "I'm standing on my own property." The men with the equipment looked at each other. The older one, who seemed to be in charge, said, "Look, lady, this doesn't feel right. We're going to need to see some actual paperwork, not just your say-so. If there's a dispute, we're not getting in the middle of it." Karen's face went purple. "I'm the HOA president. I'm authorizing this work." "Yeah, but he's the property owner and he's got a lawyer on the way. We're out." The crew started packing up their tools. "You're still getting paid," Karen shouted after them. "Bill the HOA," the older man called back as they loaded into their truck. Patricia arrived 15 minutes later, followed shortly by a police cruiser. Officer Rodriguez stepped out, looking confused about why he was there. "Someone want to tell me what's going on?" he asked. Patricia explained the situation while I stood by, my adrenaline still pumping. Officer Rodriguez listened, took notes, and then turned to Karen. "Miss Morrison, do you have documentation of these new violations and proof that proper notice was given to Mr. Quincy?" "The notice was sent via email 3 days ago," Karen said. "I never received any email," I said. I pulled out my phone and showed Officer Rodriguez my email inbox. "Nothing from the HOA, nothing from her." Patricia held out her hand. "May I see the proof of sending?" Karen clutched her phone. "I don't have to show you anything." "Actually, you do," Officer Rodriguez said. "If you're attempting to demolish someone's property, you need to prove you followed proper legal procedures." Karen's mouth opened and closed. "I sent it. It's not my fault if he didn't read it." "Show us the sent email," Patricia said calmly. After a long moment, Karen said, "I don't have it with me." "Because you never sent it," Patricia said. "Miss Morrison, you just attempted to illegally destroy my client's property. You showed up with a demolition crew without proper notice, without board authorization, and without legal standing. That's criminal trespass and attempted destruction of property." Officer Rodriguez looked at Karen with new eyes. "Is this true? You didn't have board authorization. I'm the president. I have the authority to act in the HOA's best interest." "Actually, you don't," Patricia said. She pulled out a copy of the HOA bylaws from her briefcase. She always came prepared. Section 12, subsection 4. Any enforcement action must be approved by a majority vote of the full board. You can't act unilaterally. Officer Rodriguez sighed. Miss Morrison, I'm going to have to ask you to leave Mr. Quincy's property. If you come back without permission, you'll be arrested for trespassing. Do you understand? Karen looked like she wanted to argue, but even she could see she'd crossed a line. She turned on her heel and stalked back to her car, a white Mercedes SUV that was probably worth more than my entire year's salary. After she left, Patricia and I sat on my back porch. I was shaking. This is escalating, Patricia said. She's becoming irrational. We need to go on the offensive. What do you mean? I mean, we call an emergency HOA meeting and we petition to have her removed as president. She just tried to illegally demolish your property. That's grounds for immediate removal under the bylaws. Over the next week, Patricia and I worked with Doug Anderson and the other board members to organize a special meeting. Under the HOA rules, any 5 homeowners could petition for a special meeting to address urgent matters. We got 12 signatures in 2 days. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday at 7 p.m. I spent the weekend nervous and working in my greenhouse. Tending to my plants always calmed me down. My tomatoes were still producing, my herbs were thriving, and I had just started my fall crop of lettuce and greens. On Saturday at the farmer's market, I noticed something strange. Karen was there again, but this time she was talking to the market manager, Sharon Davis. Sharon was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had been running the Willow Creek Farmers Market for over a decade. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but Sharon looked increasingly annoyed. Finally, she held up her hand and said something sharp. Karen stormed off. Sharon walked over to my booth. Graham, that woman is out of her mind. What did she want? She tried to tell me that you don't have proper licensing to sell here, that your produce might be contaminated, that I could be held liable for letting you operate. I told her to take a hike. Sharon shook her head. I've seen your operation. You're certified organic, you follow all food safety guidelines, and you're one of my best vendors. Don't worry about her. But I was worried. Karen was like a dog with a bone. She wasn't going to let this go. That afternoon, I got a call from Jennifer, the honey vendor. Graham, I hate to tell you this, but Karen Morrison came by my house. What? She said that if I kept buying produce from you for my gift baskets, she'd report me to the health department for improper food handling. I told her to get lost, but Graham, I can't afford a health department investigation. I'm a small business. It could ruin me even if I'm cleared. I felt sick. Jennifer, don't worry about it. I understand. I'm sorry. I want to support you, but I have 3 kids to feed. After I hung up, I got 2 more similar calls. Karen was systematically going after my customers, threatening them, intimidating them. She was trying to destroy my business because she couldn't destroy my greenhouse. The Monday meeting was packed. Every seat was filled and people were standing along the walls. The energy in the room was tense. Karen sat at the head table with the other board members, but she looked different. Her usual perfect appearance was slightly disheveled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Doug Anderson called the meeting to order. We're here tonight because a petition has been filed by 12 homeowners requesting the removal of Karen Morrison as HOA president, citing abuse of power and actions detrimental to the community. Miss Morrison has the right to defend herself before we vote. Karen stood up, gripping the table. This is a witch hunt. I've been trying to maintain standards in our community, and I'm being attacked for doing my job. Graham Quincy has violated our covenants repeatedly. He's running a commercial farming operation in a residential neighborhood. He's lowering our property values. He's creating traffic and noise. And when I tried to enforce our rules, he hired an expensive lawyer to bully the board. Patricia stood up. May I respond? This isn't a courtroom, Karen snapped. No, but it is a formal hearing under HOA bylaws, and Mr. Quincy has the right to defend himself against these accusations," Doug said. "Please continue, Miss Chen." Patricia laid out the facts methodically. She showed documents proving that I was in full compliance with all regulations. She presented sworn statements from neighbors saying I didn't create noise or traffic issues. She showed the board ruling in my favor, and then she dropped the bombshell. "Miss Morrison has engaged in a campaign of harassment against my client. She has threatened his customers, attempted to sabotage his business, and last week, she attempted to illegally demolish his greenhouse without proper notice or board authorization." Here is a sworn statement from Officer Rodriguez of the Willow Creek Police Department documenting that incident. She handed the statement to Doug, who read it with increasingly widened eyes. "Karen," Doug said slowly, "did you really try to have his greenhouse torn down without telling the board?" "I was acting in the HOA's best interest," Karen said, but her voice was shaky. "You can't make that decision alone," Lisa Pearson said. "That's not how this works." "That's not how any of this works." Marcus stood up from the audience. "I want to say something. I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years. I've served on this board. I've seen good HOAs and bad HOAs. Karen, what you're doing isn't about protecting property values or enforcing rules. This is personal. You're targeting Graham because you don't like him, and in the process, you're tearing apart our community." Other people started speaking up. Neighbors talked about how much they valued my presence in the community. Farmers market vendors talked about how my harassment affected them too. Sarah, the bread vendor, stood up and revealed that Karen had approached her as well, suggesting that she could become the exclusive produce supplier for the farmers market if she helped push me out. "I told her no," Sarah said, "because Graham is my friend and what she was suggesting was wrong, but she wouldn't stop. She kept calling me, emailing me, showing up at my house." By the time everyone finished speaking, Karen looked small and defeated. The board voted unanimously to remove her as president and appoint Doug Anderson as interim president until a new election could be held. Karen stood up, her face pale. "You're all making a mistake. This neighborhood is going to fall apart without proper leadership." "Proper leadership doesn't involve harassing homeowners and trying to illegally destroy their property," Doug said firmly. "Please leave, Karen." She grabbed her things and walked out. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I arrived at the farmers market to find chaos. The market manager, Sharon, was arguing with a man in a suit holding a clipboard. "What's going on?" I asked as I parked my truck. "Health inspector," Sarah said grimly. "Someone filed a complaint saying multiple vendors here are selling contaminated produce." My stomach dropped. "Karen." The inspector, a tired-looking man named David Green, spent the next 3 hours examining every produce booth at the market. He checked temperatures, inspected storage containers, reviewed licensing and certifications, and took samples of various products. When he got to my booth, he was thorough but professional. He examined my produce, checked my coolers, reviewed my organic certification, and asked detailed questions about my growing methods. Finally, he closed his notebook. "Mr. Quincy, everything looks good here. Your operation exceeds food safety standards." "I don't know who filed this complaint, but there's no merit to it." "Was it Karen Morrison?" I asked. He hesitated. "I can't reveal who filed complaints. But between you and me, I've received 3 separate complaints about this market in the past week, all from the same person, all making wild claims about contamination and health hazards. All have been unfounded." The inspector cleared every vendor at the market. Sharon was furious. "This cost us a whole morning of sales. If Karen Morrison thinks she can shut down this market with false reports, she's got another thing coming. But Karen wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, she filed complaints with the county about my greenhouse, claiming it violated building codes. County inspectors came out twice and found nothing wrong. She reported me to the state agricultural department, claiming I was misrepresenting my organic certification. They investigated and cleared me. She even called the IRS, suggesting I was evading taxes on my farmer's market income. I had to hire an accountant to help me respond to that inquiry, which was ultimately dismissed. Every false complaint cost me time and money. More importantly, it was exhausting. I was spending more time defending myself than actually farming. Emily came home for fall break and found me stressed and tired. "Dad, you look terrible." "Thanks, honey. I'm serious. This is affecting your health. Maybe you should just shut down the greenhouse for a while, let things cool off." "I can't do that. This greenhouse, the farming, it's not just a hobby anymore. It's part of who I am. And if I give in to Karen's bullying, she wins." But at what cost? It was a good question. That night, I sat in my greenhouse, surrounded by the plants I'd nurtured from seeds, and thought about why this mattered so much. It wasn't really about the money or even about defying Karen. It was about the fact that this greenhouse connected me to something real. After my wife died 6 years ago, gardening had been my therapy. Growing food and sharing it with my community had helped me heal. Karen was trying to take that away, and I couldn't let her. The farmers' market season was winding down. We only had a few weeks left before the winter break. On what should have been a routine Saturday, everything changed. I was at my booth, selling the last of my fall produce. My butternut squash was popular, and I had beautiful rainbow chard and several varieties of kale. The morning was cold but clear, perfect market weather. Karen showed up around 10 a.m. She didn't approach my booth, but she stood nearby, filming me with her phone. She'd started doing this in recent weeks, documenting everything I did, presumably looking for some violation she could report. I was helping a customer when I heard raised voices. I looked over to see Karen arguing with Jennifer, the honey vendor. "I told you to stop buying from him," Karen was saying, her voice shrill. "And I told you that's none of your business," Jennifer replied. "Leave me alone. You're supporting illegal activity. You're part of the problem." Jennifer stepped closer to Karen. "The only problem here is you. You've been harassing Graham for months. You've been harassing all of us. You're not even HOA president anymore. You have no authority here." "I have the authority of a concerned citizen," Karen said. "And I'm going to make sure that everyone knows what kind of operation Graham Quincy is running." That's when Sharon stepped in. "Karen, you need to leave. This is private property and the market management has the right to remove anyone causing a disturbance. You can't kick me out. This is public property. It's a county-owned parking lot that the market rents. You're trespassing. Leave now or I'm calling the police." Karen's face went red. She turned to the gathered crowd of shoppers and vendors. "You're all being taken in by him," she shouted, pointing at me. "Graham Quincy is a fraud. His produce isn't organic. He's running an illegal business. He's violating health codes." "Stop," Sharon said firmly. "That's slander. You're making false accusations that could harm these vendors' businesses. Leave now." Karen looked around at the hostile faces surrounding her and finally seemed to realize she'd gone too far. She left, but not before yelling, "You'll all regret this." The market continued, but the mood was subdued. My customers were supportive, but I could see the worry in their eyes. This situation was spiraling out of control. That evening, I got a call from Doug Anderson, the interim HOA president. "Graham, we need to talk. Can I come by?" Doug arrived 20 minutes later. He looked serious as he sat at my kitchen table. The board met tonight. We wanted to give you a heads up. Karen is planning to sue you personally for defamation and harassment. I stared at him. She's suing me. I'm the one being harassed. I know. It's absurd. But she's claiming that you've been spreading false rumors about her, damaging her reputation in the community, and coordinating a campaign to have her removed from the HOA board. That's insane. She's the one who's been coming after me. We all know that. The board is prepared to testify on your behalf if it goes to court. But Graham, there's something else. Several vendors from the farmers market have come to me. They're worried that if Karen succeeds in shutting you down, the whole market could be affected. You're the primary supplier of organic produce. Without you, at least half the vendors would have to find new suppliers, and there's nobody local who can match your volume or quality. This was the part I'd been dreading. My legal battle with Karen wasn't just affecting me anymore. It was affecting the entire local food ecosystem in Willow Creek. What do they want me to do? I asked. Sharon has an idea. She wants to call a meeting with all the market vendors and stakeholders. If we can show that Karen's actions are harming the local economy, we might be able to get the county involved. The meeting was held the following Tuesday at the community center. Over 30 people showed up, including vendors, local restaurant owners, and even the manager of the local food co-op. Sharon led the meeting. We're here because Karen Morrison's harassment campaign against Graham Quincy is threatening the viability of our farmers market and the local sustainable food network, Sharon began. Graham supplies produce to 12 of our market vendors, 3 restaurants, and 2 retail stores. If he's forced to shut down, the economic impact would be significant. Restaurant owner David Park spoke up. My restaurant, Green Plate, features local organic ingredients. Graham has been my primary supplier for 3 years. His heirloom tomatoes, his herbs, his specialty greens, they're a major part of what makes my menu special. I've looked for alternative suppliers, but there's nobody within 50 miles who grows organic produce at his scale and quality. If Graham goes, I'd have to completely revise my menu and possibly source from California or Washington, which defeats the whole purpose of featuring local food. Others shared similar stories. The juice bar on Main Street used my produce exclusively. The food co-op had a popular local section that featured my vegetables. Sarah's artisan bread booth included herb focaccias made with my fresh herbs. Jennifer's honey gift baskets featured my dried flowers. The economic impact extends beyond direct sales, said Rachel Thompson, an economics professor at the community college who had come to observe. Graham's operation supports approximately 15 local businesses directly and probably double that indirectly. His farmers market presence attracts customers who shop at other vendors. His greenhouse provides educational tours for schools. He's even trained several young farmers who have gone on to start their own operations. This is what we call a keystone business in a local economy. Sharon nodded. Which is why we need to document this impact and present it to the county commissioners. If we can show that Karen Morrison's harassment is damaging the local economy, the county might step in. Over the next week, we gathered data. Rachel helped me calculate the economic impact of my operation. Between direct sales, wholesale to restaurants and stores, and the indirect impact on businesses that depended on my produce, my little greenhouse operation contributed approximately $200,000 annually to the local economy. It wasn't huge, but in a small town like Willow Creek, it mattered. Patricia helped me compile documentation of Karen's harassment. Copies of false complaints, testimony from vendors she'd threatened, records of the illegal demolition attempt, and evidence of her campaign to sabotage my business. We submitted a formal complaint to the Douglas County Board of Commissioners, requesting an investigation into Karen Morrison's actions and their economic impact on the community. The county took it seriously. They assigned an investigator, Maria Santiago, to look into the situation. She interviewed me, Patricia, multiple farmers market vendors, restaurant owners, and even some of my neighbors. She also interviewed Karen. 3 weeks later, Maria issued her report. I read it in my kitchen with Patricia looking over my shoulder. The report was damning. Maria had documented a pattern of harassment, false complaints, and intimidation tactics. She'd found that Karen had filed 17 separate complaints with various government agencies, all of which had been investigated and found to be without merit. She discovered that Karen had contacted at least 8 of my customers and threatened them. Most significantly, she'd uncovered evidence that Karen had lied to the demolition crew, telling them she had proper authorization when she didn't. "This is good," Patricia said. "This gives us ammunition." The county commissioners scheduled a public hearing to address the issue. It was held in late November, just after Thanksgiving. The hearing room was packed. Karen showed up with her own lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit named Richard Humphrey. He stood up and argued that Karen was simply a concerned homeowner trying to protect her community's property values, and that she was the real victim of a coordinated harassment campaign. "My client has been vilified for trying to enforce reasonable community standards," Humphrey said. "She's been subjected to verbal abuse, threats, and a politically motivated removal from her position as HOA president. Now she's being attacked by county government for exercising her rights as a citizen to file legitimate complaints." Patricia stood up to respond. She was calm and methodical, laying out the facts. She showed that Karen's complaints were not legitimate, but rather a pattern of harassment designed to drive me out of business. She presented testimony from vendors, neighbors, and business owners. She showed the economic impact data. Then she pulled out something I didn't know she had. "I'd also like to submit evidence that Miss Morrison has a personal financial interest in Mr. Quincy's failure." She handed documents to the commissioners. 6 months ago, Karen Morrison registered a business with the state, KM Organic Farms LLC. She's been quietly negotiating with the farmers market to become a vendor, specifically as a produce supplier. She saw Graham's success and wanted to replace him, eliminating the competition. The room erupted. Karen's face went white. "That's completely irrelevant," Humphrey sputtered. "It's absolutely relevant," Patricia said. "It shows motive. This entire harassment campaign was designed to drive my client out of business so Miss Morrison could take his place at the farmers market." She tried to use her position as HOA president as a weapon to destroy a competitor. One of the commissioners, an older woman named Barbara Hayes, spoke up. "Miss Morrison, is this true? Do you have a business that would compete with Mr. Quincy?" Karen stood up. "I have every right to start a business. There's nothing illegal about that." "No, but using your position as HOA president to harass a competitor is illegal," Commissioner Hayes said. "That's abuse of power and possibly criminal fraud." The hearing continued for another hour, but the outcome was clear. The commissioners issued a formal censure of Karen Morrison and recommended that the district attorney's office review the case for possible criminal charges. I thought it was finally over, but Karen had one more move. 2 days after the commissioners' hearing, I arrived at the farmers' market to set up my booth for the final market day of the season. It was a cold December morning and there was frost on the ground. But when I got there, I found the entire market in chaos. Someone had vandalized multiple booths overnight. Sarah's bread display had been smashed. Jennifer's honey jars were broken. My portable canopy had been slashed, and someone had spray painted "illegal" across my market table. Sharon was talking to the police when I arrived. Officer Rodriguez was there, along with another officer I didn't recognize. "Graham," Sharon said when she saw me. "I'm so sorry. We don't know who did this, but we're reviewing security footage." The community center had recently installed security cameras in the parking lot. We watched the footage together in Sharon's office. At 3 a.m., a figure in dark clothing and a hoodie approached the market area. The person systematically damaged multiple booths, focusing especially on mine. "Can you see who it is?" I asked. The officer zoomed in, but the person's face was hidden. However, as the figure left, they walked past a light and there was a clear shot of their vehicle. A white Mercedes SUV with a distinctive custom license plate. "Pure Life, Karen's car." "We've got her," Officer Rodriguez said grimly. The police went to Karen's house that afternoon. According to Officer Rodriguez, who called me later, she denied everything at first. But when confronted with the video evidence, she broke down. She was arrested and charged with vandalism, criminal mischief, and harassment. Her lawyer tried to get her released on her own recognizance, but the district attorney argued that she'd shown a pattern of escalating behavior and was a danger to the community. She was held on $10,000 bail. The local newspaper covered the story. The headline read, "Former HOA President Arrested for Harassment Campaign Against Local Farmer." The article detailed the months of harassment, the false complaints, the attempted illegal demolition, and finally, the vandalism. The community response was overwhelming. People I'd never met sent me messages of support. Local businesses offered to help repair the damage to my market booth. The farmers market set up a GoFundMe to cover the costs of the vandalism, and it raised over $5,000 in 2 days. Emily came home for winter break and found me in the greenhouse working on my winter crop. "Dad, I'm so proud of you." "For what?" "Getting harassed for 6 months. For not giving up. For standing your ground. For showing me what it means to fight for something you believe in." Karen's trial was scheduled for the following March. In the meantime, she was ordered to stay away from me, my property, the farmer's market, and all my customers. She wasn't allowed to file any complaints or contact me in any way. The HOA held elections for a new president in January. Doug Anderson was officially elected, and one of his first acts was to pass a resolution formally acknowledging that my greenhouse and farming activities were valued community assets. The farmers' market reopened for the season in April. I had spent the winter in my greenhouse, growing under lights, perfecting new varieties, and planning for the coming year. My first market day back was emotional. So many people came by just to say hello and tell me they were glad I was still there. Sharon made a speech at the opening ceremony. "This market exists because of people like Graham Quincy, who grow beautiful food with care and integrity. We're lucky to have him, and we're committed to supporting local farmers who make our community better." Karen's trial in March was relatively quick. Faced with overwhelming evidence, including the security footage, the documented harassment, and testimony from dozens of witnesses, she pleaded guilty to multiple counts of harassment and vandalism. She was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, 3 years of probation, and ordered to pay restitution to me and the other vandalized vendors. She was also ordered to complete anger management counseling and banned from holding any HOA position for 10 years. During her victim impact statement opportunity, Patricia helped me prepare what I wanted to say. When I stood up in court with Karen sitting at the defendant's table looking small and defeated, I kept it simple. "Karen, I don't know why you targeted me. Maybe it was jealousy. Maybe it was a desire for control. Maybe it was something else. But what you did hurt me, hurt my business, and hurt my community. I've spent months defending myself against false accusations, dealing with stress and anxiety, and wondering if I was going to lose something I'd built with my own hands. I hope you get the help you need, but more than that, I hope you learn that you can't tear other people down to build yourself up. The judge thanked me and delivered her sentence. As I left the courthouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was really over. That spring and summer were the best farming seasons I'd ever had. Word of mouth from the trial and news coverage brought new customers to the farmers market. Restaurants that had never contacted me before started placing orders. The local food co-op expanded their local produce section, featuring my vegetables prominently. But more than the business success, I felt reconnected to why I started this in the first place. Working in the greenhouse, my hands in the soil, watching seeds become plants become food. It was healing. The community support I'd received reminded me that most people are good, that neighbors look out for each other, and that standing up to bullies matters. Emily graduated that May with her environmental science degree. At her graduation party, she told everyone that she'd decided to pursue sustainable agriculture, inspired by watching me fight to protect my greenhouse. My dad showed me that growing food is political, she said. It's about community, resilience, and standing up for what you believe in. I want to help other people start their own gardens and greenhouses. I couldn't have been prouder. The farmers market thrived. Several young farmers, inspired by my story, started their own growing operations. I began offering informal mentoring, teaching people about greenhouse growing, organic methods, and direct marketing. The local community college even asked me to teach a workshop on small-scale sustainable agriculture. Sarah expanded her bread booth and started making pizzas on site using my fresh herbs and tomatoes. Jennifer's honey business grew, and she hired an assistant. David Park's restaurant got written up in Portland Monthly magazine, specifically praising his use of local ingredients. The Willow Creek Farmers Market became known as one of the best in the region. Food tourists would drive from Portland, 2 hours away, just to shop there. The economic impact study that Rachel Thompson had done got updated, and it showed that the market now contributed over $1 million annually to the local economy. Doug Anderson proved to be an excellent HOA president. He focused on actual community building rather than enforcement. He organized neighborhood potlucks, created a community garden in the common area, and established reasonable, fair policies that people actually wanted to follow. As for Karen Morrison, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that after she served her jail time, she moved to California to live with her sister. I hope she found peace and learned from her mistakes. 1 year after Karen's arrest, I was in my greenhouse on a Saturday morning, preparing for the market. It was early June, and everything was producing beautifully. My tomatoes were starting to ripen, my herbs were lush, my cucumbers were climbing their trellises. There was a knock on the greenhouse door. I turned to see a young woman, maybe 25 years old, holding a notebook. "Mr. Quincy, I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Rebecca Foster. I just bought a house in Meadowview Estates, and I want to start a greenhouse like yours. I heard about everything you went through, and I wondered if you had any advice." I wiped my hands on my jeans and smiled. "Come in. Let me show you around." As I walked her through my operation, explaining my growing systems, my seed selection, my marketing strategies, I realized how much had changed. A year ago, I was fighting for the right to exist. Now, I was helping someone else start their journey. The most important thing, I told Rebecca as we stood among the tomato plants, is to remember why you're doing this. It's not just about growing food or making money. It's about being part of your community, about sharing something good with your neighbors, about connecting to the earth in a meaningful way. If you remember that, you'll be fine. She smiled and took notes. And if someone tries to shut me down, then you fight, I said. But you fight smart. Document everything, know your rights, get good legal help, and build relationships with your neighbors. Most people are reasonable. It's only the occasional person who's not, and when you stand up to them, you usually find that the community has your back. Rebecca thanked me and left with a bag of starter plants and a list of resources I'd compiled. As I watched her drive away, I felt hopeful. The future of local food, of community resilience, of people fighting for what mattered, it was in good hands. That afternoon at the farmer's market was perfect. The weather was beautiful, the crowds were large, and my booth sold out of almost everything by noon. As I packed up, Sarah came over with a still warm loaf of rosemary focaccia made with my herbs. "For you," she said. "Thanks for not giving up." "Thanks for standing with me," I replied. Marcus stopped by as I was loading my truck. "Hey Graham, HOA meeting next week. Doug wants to discuss expanding the community garden. You interested in helping design it?" "Absolutely." As I drove home, my truck empty and my heart full, I thought about everything that had happened. The harassment, the stress, the legal battles, they'd all been worth it. Not just because I'd won, but because I'd learned what really mattered. Community, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what you believe in. My greenhouse stood in my backyard, solid and productive, full of life and possibility. It wasn't just a structure for growing plants anymore. It was a symbol of resilience, of what happens when someone refuses to be bullied, and of the power of a community coming together. That evening, I called Emily at her new job with a sustainable agriculture nonprofit in Eugene. "Hey honey, how's it going?" "Good, Dad. Really good. We just got funding for a project teaching urban residents to grow food in small spaces. I'm thinking about greenhouse designs, and I was hoping you could consult." "I'd love to." After we hung up, I walked out to my greenhouse one more time. The sun was setting, casting golden light through the glass panels. My plants stood in neat rows, healthy and strong. I could hear the hum of the irrigation system, the gentle sound of water nourishing roots. I'd built something that mattered here. Not just a greenhouse, but a network of relationships, a model for sustainable living, and a small but meaningful piece of the solution to creating resilient local food systems. Karen Morrison had tried to destroy it all because she saw my success as a threat, because she wanted power and control, because she thought she could use her position to tear someone down. But she'd failed, and in failing, she'd accidentally made me and my operation stronger. The community had rallied around me. They'd seen the value in what I was doing and refused to let it be destroyed. That was the real lesson here. Bullies only win when good people stay silent. When a community stands together, when people support each other and fight for what's right, that's when real change happens. I locked up the greenhouse and headed inside to make dinner. Tomorrow was Sunday, my day to rest and plan for the week ahead. I had restaurant orders to fill, transplants to pot up, and a new batch of seeds to start. My calendar was full, my greenhouse was productive, and my community was strong. Karen Morrison had tried to seize my greenhouse and destroy my business, and in the process, she'd lost everything. Her position, her reputation, her freedom, and her chance to be part of something meaningful. The farmer's market she'd tried to sabotage was thriving without her. The community she'd tried to control had rejected her. The competitor she'd tried to eliminate was more successful than ever. As I sat down to dinner, I raised my glass of water in a silent toast to everyone who had stood with me, to the power of community, and to the simple, profound act of growing food and sharing it with your neighbors. This was what mattered. This was what was worth fighting for, and I'd won.